The forest was supposed to be empty, but it felt like something was breathing with me.
I was 12, the first time it happened. Back then, camping was one of my favorite things. My grandmother loved the woods more than anyone I knew, and she often took me with her on weekend trips. We'd pack light, an old canvas tent, a couple sleeping bags, a lantern, and a cooler of food, and drive until the roads gave way to dirt trails. Then we'd hike until she found the perfect spot. That night, the perfect spot was a small clearing deep in the forest. Pines crowded close around us, their branches swaying in the evening wind. A creek whispered nearby, just loud enough to lull me into calm. We built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and told stories until the stars burned bright overhead. I felt safe. I always did with her. But that night would change how I felt about the woods forever. When the fire died down, we crawled into the tent. My grandmother zipped the flap shut, turned off the lantern, and whispered goodnight. I listened to the forest as I drifted, rustling leaves, the creek, the occasional hoot of an owl. At first, everything was normal. Then, the sound began. A soft scrape, like something heavy being dragged across the ground. It came from the trees, slow, rhythmic, closer with every second. My eyes snapped open. The tent was pitch black. I held my breath, straining to listen. Scrape, pause, scrape. It circled the tent. My heart pounded in my throat. I wanted to wake my grandmother, but fear glued me in place. I imagined unzipping the tent, peeking outside, and seeing something I'd never be able to forget. The dragging stopped right by my head. I bit down on my fist to stop from crying out. Inches away, separated only by thin canvas, something shuffled. Then a soft, deliberate press pushed inward, denting the fabric near my face. It was like a hand, or claws, testing, searching. I shut my eyes, praying, begging for it to go away. After what felt like hours, the dragging started again. Slower this time, circling once more, until finally it faded into the woods. I didn't sleep at all. I lay frozen, wide-eyed, until the first gray light of dawn touched the canvas. When my grandmother unzipped the tent, she found me pale, shaking, clutching my sleeping bag like a lifeline. She asked what was wrong. I almost told her, almost, but the words wouldn't come. I just pointed at the ground outside. The dirt was disturbed, not footprints, not paw prints, just long, uneven grooves, as if something massive had been pulled through the clearing. They circled the tent completely. Her face tightened. She said nothing, only began to pack. We left the campsite within the hour. I thought that would be the end of it. A strange childhood memory, terrifying but distant. But the sound never left me. Sometimes, at night in my own bed, I'd hear it again. Soft, faint, a dragging just outside my window. I told myself it was imagination, trauma replaying. But deep down I wasn't sure. Years passed. I grew older, stronger, convinced myself it had been an animal, a bear, a deer, something natural. Until last fall, I decided to take my girlfriend camping. I wanted to show her the peace of the woods, the beauty my grandmother had always cherished. We hiked far, just like I used to, and found a clearing by a creek that felt perfect. That night, as we lay in the tent, the memories came rushing back. I brushed them aside. That was years ago. This was different. But sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound. Scrape, pause, scrape. My blood froze. It was the same. Exactly the same. Circling the tent, slow and patient. My girlfriend stirred. "What's that?" she whispered. I put a hand over her mouth. My other hand clutched the flashlight, though I didn't dare turn it on. The dragging stopped, right by our heads. The canvas bent inward again, as if touched by invisible fingers. My girlfriend whimpered against my palm. I wanted to scream, to run, but terror pinned me down. I could feel it on the other side of the fabric, its presence heavy, deliberate, waiting. Then after an eternity, the dragging resumed, around the tent, into the trees, until silence returned. When dawn came, we fled. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us looked back. But when we got home, I noticed something that made my stomach turn to stone. On the outside of the tent, above where my head had lain, was a smear, faint reddish brown, a streak that hadn't been there before. It looked like blood. Now, even in my apartment, I hear it sometimes. At night, just beyond the thin glass of my bedroom window. Scrape, pause, scrape. It doesn't matter where I am. The thing I heard as a child in those woods never stayed there. And one night, I fear it won't stop at circling. It'll come inside. I thought camping alone would clear my head. Life had been heavy for months. Stress piling on from work, the city pressing in from every side. I wanted silence. I wanted to breathe without hearing traffic, neighbors, or phones buzzing. So one Friday, I packed up my tent, food, and a small fire kit, and I drove out to the mountains. The road grew narrower the farther I went, until pavement turned into dirt and trees swallowed the horizon. I passed no other cars, no houses, no signs of people at all, just endless forest. When I finally parked, the world felt still. I shouldered my pack, hiked deep into the woods, and found a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. A stream trickled nearby, and the earth smelled cool and damp. It was exactly what I'd wanted. Isolated, quiet, safe. Or so I thought. By evening, my tent was up, and a fire crackled warmly. The stars appeared one by one above the treetops, clearer than I'd seen in years. I cooked a small meal, listened to the stream, and felt myself relax. For hours, I sat there thinking this was the best decision I'd made in a long time. But when the fire burned low and I zipped myself into the tent, the peace began to shift. The forest had grown too quiet. At first, I brushed it off. Of course it was quiet. I was miles away from anyone. But as I lay there, every small noise sharpened. The snap of a twig, the flutter of leaves, the far-off cry of an owl. Then came the footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. Not an animal scurrying, not a deer's quick shuffle. These were measured, human. I froze, listening as they drew closer, crunching leaves one by one, until they stopped right outside the tent. I held my breath. The silence pressed in so hard, I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. Whoever, or whatever, stood there didn't move for what felt like forever. Then slowly, the footsteps began again, circling the tent. One lap, two, then gone, fading into the woods. I lay awake the rest of the night, too afraid to unzip the flap. Every time I almost drifted off, I thought I heard them again. Just beyond the clearing, waiting. When dawn finally came, I staggered out, exhausted, scanning the area for any sign of animals or people. That's when I saw them. Footprints, barefoot, human. They circled my tent in the dirt, larger than mine, deep enough to show weight. And they weren't old. Edges sharp, fresh from the night before. My stomach turned cold. I told myself to pack up and leave, but part of me wanted proof. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the prints were older than I thought. But no, There were too many, too precise, too fresh. Someone had walked around my tent, barefoot, watching. I should have left, but pride or stubbornness rooted me there. The second night, I built a bigger fire, convincing myself the light would keep me safe. I even kept my knife close by, just in case. Darkness came fast. I sat by the fire for hours, ears straining for the faintest sound. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And then, it began again. The same steps, slow, heavy, closer. I clutched the knife so tight my hand ached. The fire crackled low, casting long shadows across the trees. The footsteps stopped once more, this time directly behind me, on the far side of the firelight. I didn't dare turn my head. Minutes dragged on. Finally, the sound moved again, circling wide through the woods before fading back into silence. I didn't sleep. I sat awake until dawn, trembling, waiting, and in the morning, I found more prints. Dozens this time, bare feet, surrounding the camp, as if more than one person had been there. That was enough. I packed quickly, stuffing everything into my backpack with shaking hands. My only thought was escape, but the hike back to the car was worse. Every few minutes, I stopped, convinced I heard someone pacing behind me. Leaves crunching, branches snapping, always just out of sight. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but when I glanced over my shoulder, I swore I saw movement, shadows darting between the trees, too tall to be animals. The closer I got to the trailhead, the faster I moved, until I was nearly running. My breath came ragged, panic rising with every step. Finally, I burst out of the woods and saw my car. Relief crashed over me as I unlocked it, threw my pack in, and started the engine. I didn't look back, not once, but relief didn't last. That night, safe in my apartment, I almost convinced myself it had been paranoia, stress, too much imagination. Until I heard it again, soft footsteps outside my window, slow, heavy. The same as in the woods. I froze, staring at the blinds, heart slamming against my ribs. And then, silence. I forced myself to look. I pulled the blinds back just enough to peek outside. No one was there. But on the glass, faint and smudged, was the print of a hand, bare, wet with dirt, pressed against the window, right where my head had lain inside. I moved apartments a week later. I haven't gone camping since. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear them again. Those barefoot steps, slow and deliberate, pacing just outside, waiting for me to sleep, waiting for the right moment to come inside. It started as nothing more than a walk, the kind of walk you take to escape your own head, where the silence of the woods feels safer than the noise of home. I'd driven up to the ridge on a cool October afternoon, the sky gray and heavy, the kind of day where shadows fall early. The trail was quiet, damp leaves soft underfoot, the forest closing in on all sides. After an hour, I cut off the main path, letting instinct guide me deeper. The trees grew taller here, their trunks thick and dark with moss. I breathed in the damp air, savoring the peace. But then, my boot struck something hard. At first, I thought it was just a rock hidden beneath the leaves. But when I scraped the dirt aside, my fingers struck wood. A box. Small, square, and buried shallowly, as if someone wanted it hidden, but not gone. Curiosity tightened its grip. I crouched, brushing soil from its surface, revealing rotted planks bound with rusted nails. A makeshift lid sat loose on top, and though every part of me whispered to leave it, I lifted the lid anyway. Inside was a book, a diary. Its cover was leather, stiff and weathered, edges cracked from years underground. I hesitated, heart thumping, before opening it. The pages were damp, words faded, but I could still read. And what I read didn't feel like a diary. It felt like a warning. The first entry was dated 1962. "We found the cabin today. Shouldn't have gone inside, but the storm was bad. It was supposed to be empty, but it wasn't. Someone else was there, watching." The words were shaky, written in hurried strokes, like the writer's hands trembled as they wrote. I turned the page. The man never spoke, just stood in the corner, eyes dark. Every time we tried to leave, he'd appear at the window, closer than before. We didn't sleep, we didn't dare. I swallowed hard, unease spreading. More pages, more entries. We heard him at night, walking around the cabin, always barefoot, always close. This morning, the walls were marked with blood. But when the sun rose, it was gone, vanished like it had never been. I shivered. The words echoed stories I'd heard whispered before. Stories of cabins deep in the woods that never felt truly empty. But the final entry was the worst. We tried to leave. We thought we were free. But the forest doesn't let go. Every path bends back to the cabin. We buried this so someone would know. If you find this, leave. Don't go inside. Don't follow the footprints. Don't answer the crying. And then, one last line, scrawled in jagged letters that cut into the page. He chooses one to stay. The forest around me suddenly felt heavier, darker. I looked up from the diary, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A cabin, half hidden between the trees. It hadn't been there when I walked in. Or maybe I just hadn't seen it. But now it loomed, weathered wood and broken windows, leaning like it had stood for 100 years. The box still sat at my knees, the diary open in my hands. The warning replayed in my mind, "Don't go inside." Yet I felt pulled toward it, like the forest itself wanted me to step closer. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The air inside was thick, damp, filled with the smell of mildew and rot. Dust floated through shafts of grey light, cutting in through broken boards. The floor groaned under my weight. And then I saw it, the corner. Just like the diary said. A shadow, tall, human-shaped. I blinked, and it was gone. But I knew something was there. I should have turned back, but I wandered deeper instead. The walls were scarred, faint lines that looked almost like scratches, almost like words. Then my eyes caught it. A smear of dark red along the wood. Blood, fresh, wet. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but when I blinked, it was gone. The boards were clean, just like the diary said. I bolted for the door, but outside wasn't any safer. The forest had changed. The trail I'd followed was gone, swallowed by trees that hadn't been there before. And then, the sound began. Footsteps, slow, barefoot, circling me. Leaves shifted, branches creaked, but I couldn't see anyone. Just movement at the edges of my vision, always just out of sight. I clutched the diary like it might save me, but the final words burned in my mind. He chooses one. To stay. I ran. Through the trees, over roots and rocks, lungs burning. But no matter how far I went, the forest only grew denser. And then, ahead of me, I saw it again. The cabin. Waiting, as if I'd never left. The crying started at dusk, soft, low, and rising from beneath the ground. Like a child's sobs echoing through the roots. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound seeped in anyway. I dropped to my knees, clawing at the dirt in panic, trying to find the source. And then I realized I was digging in the same spot I'd found the box. Another lid, another buried piece. But this one wasn't wood. It was bone. A hand, pale, reaching upward, fingers curled as if frozen mid-scratch. I screamed, stumbling back. And behind me, the footsteps stopped, close. I turned. The shadow from the cabin stood there, closer than before, silent, watching. The diary fell from my hand, pages fluttering in the wind. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. The forest closed in, the air pressed heavy, and the crying rose louder, closer, filling every space inside my head. The last thing I remember was the shadow stepping toward me. And then, darkness. When I woke, I wasn't in my bed. I wasn't home. I was in the cabin, alone. The diary sat on the table before me, open to a new page. The ink was fresh. The handwriting was mine. It read, "We found the cabin today. Shouldn't have gone inside." And I realized then, the forest hadn't just chosen someone to stay. It had chosen me.